Hey there, and welcome to another episode of True Talks with Jess, where we discuss the real behind the real, the things that are happening in real life of superheroes behind the real, the Instagram reel, the Facebook reel, the Snapchat filters, and in real life. This week's guest is Josh McNeil, LCSW, co-founder of Melanated Social Work and The Bearded Social Worker on IG.
Media reel, what's going on in life, and kind of their journeys to fighting their own personal superhero struggle. Today I have with me Josh McNeil. Josh is a clinical social worker in Boston, correct? And he is
Yes.
to get more men into social work and for more men to be open about mental health services as a clinician. He's also the co-founder of Melanated Social Work, which is like a really, really great Instagram if you want to find out more about mental health and the Black, colored, Afro-Caribbean culture in general from all aspects. He covers LGBTQI issues, social issues, injustice, mental health. He shares a lot from other platforms on that. He's also on Instagram as the Bearded Social Worker. So I met Josh in person in June of this year. I spoke at a conference and he was there. And he was really open about his experiences as a therapist who goes to therapy, who is engaged in different things in the community. And it was very intriguing to me because I don't know very many other men therapists, one, or men therapists who see therapists, or a Black male therapist who goes to therapy, or somebody who's a Black male therapist who's under like 50. So you're like a whole walking, talking anomaly. And you were out there to really learn how to develop and hone your craft. So you're so into like really not only getting better for you, but for those that you serve. So I was like, I have to have Josh on. So guys, welcome. Here's Josh.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. So the things that really piqued my interest and I really wanted to talk to you about is one, like the struggle of just being a Black male outside of like a Black male therapist, just like that particular struggle, because like I know the narrative that I grew up was like, men don't cry, be strong, suck it up, da 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 da. So we ended up passing off trauma as like heritage, culture, and tradition. And now that we're stopping that narrative, what is that like for you in your day to day?
Right. So again, thanks for having me. I think that we definitely have been taught uh, from our communities about toxic masculinity. And again, don't cry, suck it up, be a man. Um, like just having a high pain threshold and not being able to verbally talk about what it is. And I think it's not even outside of race. It's just generally, you know, I used to play football, guys that come from many different backgrounds that talk about this, about that. It's ingrained in us. And I don't know why that is, but I think that now we're in a very interesting space where, there was a thing called trap hip hop and trap, that genre. Now we're in a time where you got the 444s of the world, right? Jay-Z talking about his growth. Now you're talking about even Offset. His last album was talking about stuff with him being a father and his gripes with his father or what have you. And I have things that uh, like Charlemagne talking about anxiety. I think in Shook Ones, we're just in a very growth heavy space as a gender and as Black men, uh, as a Black male that is a therapist, Black male therapist. I feel like now we're just tapping into what the spaces and places, because there's not a lot of spaces and places for us to heal and unpack these things and to talk about these things. Now the ball's getting rolling slightly, and it's just I couldn't have picked a better profession to get into.
I appreciate that. And you work with women, right? In your current role, you work with women.
You mean as like they work with, like as coworkers, or am I working
No, like
like
your
having
population
women that are
demographic,
clients?
your clients.
So it's a few sisters here and there that I work with, but priority are men of color, Black and brown, who are like gunshot wound victims or stab victims, or those that have been dealing with, I guess, community violence. That's probably my target, but that doesn't mean that I don't have some clients that may come in that just want to seek some therapy based upon my stipulations. If I could see them talk about some grief. There's a lot of grief that I do. And also to speak on that, I have led some psychoeducation groups upon, grieving during the holidays, um, general grief, trauma, gratitude that have had the likes of women or moms that have had deceased or murdered, usually sons. So I work with a very rich array of clients.
So when you talk about like I think about when people come to me, like particularly like I used to work in I used to have like a real job. I wasn't always in private practice. And they always thought like I was a secretary. Like I was a clinical director. Like, oh, you brought the secretary. So when I say that, like, do you find that there are any like microaggressions or places where you feel like you have to kind of like really like puff out your chest and say, this is who I am and I belong in this space as a result of just being who you are and how you were born?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's definitely been some microaggressions. Like I've had my work lanyard on, and people have mistaken me for being a client, or people have mistaken me for being quote unquote, let's just say a token or stereotypical name. Raekwon's brother, Raekwon's nephew, Raekwon's father, anybody with the social worker or the therapist, or even a client that I've been mistaken for. And this has happened now in Boston, but I used to be a social worker in New York City, between Brooklyn and Harlem, New York. So as definitely happened with me. And I don't, to be honest, based upon there not being a lot of men in the field, especially Black men, I guess I'm masculine presented. You said I'm the bearded social worker. I have a beard, uh, 6 foot, about 6 foot, over 200 pounds. I work out. I know what society says about me and what I may look at through others. I think Ralph Ellison said the double consciousness of how you can see yourself through others. So I have to have that. And I'm afraid, to be honest, I'll be vulnerable with you. I'm afraid to puff out my chest. There have been times where I've had mentors or older men that say you have to liberate yourself, and you can't always be in fear, but you have to. I'll say the stuff that I've had to maybe puff my chest out about. I have to make sure I'm calculated with what I do.
And how do you navigate self-care into that? So like I didn't believe in microaggressions, and I didn't believe like that there was like still like racism and classism and sexism and like all this stuff in corporate America, particularly in helping and healing fields, until I entered a place where I was so aware that I was young, Black, and female. Like before it was just like, oh well, she's just a really bright person. So then I realized that I was young, Black, and female. So they was like, oh, you got like this trifecta stuff going against you. And I had to then begin to make sure that I presented as though I belonged where I was. And so on the flip side of that, like there was so little self-care happening. So how are you aware of those fears and things that can drive you like off the cliff, and implement self-care that's able to be sustained as you go through and practice for yourself as well as for your clients?
I hope I'm able to answer this question. That was a lot. I'm gonna try to say this as best as I can. And if I miss something or I didn't hit the mark, please let me know. But I think the biggest thing that I do is my melanated social work brothers. We are a support system for each other. So even to go back to the melanated social work stuff, before we started getting into it, having an IG, having a podcast, speaking at schools, and trying to build up our brand, we were just some regular students at Boston College School of Social Work, uh, 4 men of color. Not a lot of us there. It's a white female dominated, profession, but a lot of white women, and we're basically, it's not a lot of us. So just out of us feeling like outsiders, that's where we grew a rapport with each other. So using them, spirituality is something that I take. I take precedence with myself in my own personal way. Again, going to therapy. Uh, a lot of my family, they live all over, so being able to have vacation time to go to maybe Atlanta or New York or wherever they are, seeing my family, um, and just another thing for self care for myself as a Black man, going back to just how I'm probably perceived. Like people don't understand. There's definitely a history in this country of like Black men with white women. Anything you go from Rosewood, white woman allegedly had a black man that raped her. You go to Oklahoma City, there was something that went on with a white woman saying a black man raped her. You look at constantly through history, even in the first movie ever, probably The Birth of a Nation, the heroine is jumping off the cliff because of fear of a black man. So that's just an inherent thing that I have to think about, that I think that people really don't know. And I think any black man, you have some fear of white women around. So just realizing, with all that being said, I'm not crazy. And I don't want to say that in a pejorative or negative sense, but the society, they want to make a black man lash out and seem like he's the angry one, but the circumstances around it, um, it, if you understand like we do, you know that I'm not the one bugging out. So just realizing that, all these situations around me, I just have to rise above them and just build and further build upon my character to deal with all these things. If that answers your question.
It does, and it almost sounds like being a black man is almost enough to be able to cause you to have like some level of PTSD, to where you're like, yo, like I'm so aware of what's going on around me. I'm hyper vigilant of my surroundings, what I say, how I do, when I move. So then to have all of that and then find a space where you can kind of be open and transparent with the therapist. And I realized recently, this week, actually, how hard it is to find a therapist. I got a girlfriend in New York who needed a therapist, and I went through to try and find her somebody. And I was like, I couldn't imagine by the time a client comes to me and says, hey, Jess, you're my person. And it's not, particularly when a male calls, and I'm like, I try and really, really be more open, passionate, and compassionate when I have a male client call. Because I know that for a male to reach out to a female for help, first of all, is like hard. A lot of the guys are like, I wasn't going to call you just because you were a girl. Like, I was looking for a dude, and either a male referred me to you, or I've seen you talk and I've heard of you, and I know that you're going to be able to help me outside of my masculinity and walk me through as a person. But oftentimes, like, I have guys that call, they're like, well, I found you, but do you know a male therapist? Was there a struggle for you in finding a therapist?
No. I mean, since I'm well, more recently, the last two therapists that I've had have both been black men, and it was literally by happenstance. But the first time I ever went to therapy, I was in college. Just, I would say having anxiety and dealing with some adjustment issues, and just stress from being a college student. And my therapist then was a brother, a black man. But and it's interesting you say, like, a lot of guys, they have a proclivity to want to go to a woman, and I've seen that, or at least in Melanated Social Work on our last podcast, we talked about how, what my guys were talking about, they have more of a proclivity to want to go to a woman because it's like, oh, that's like mom. It's like a maternal type thing that will have them to be more open to go to a woman. But I think, maybe I'm not gonna have this therapist forever, but in another phase, I'll be open to having, I really want a black woman social worker. And to be honest, I'd be open to even having a white woman social worker down the line, but I got to get the black people in first and then the white people. And I'm saying that to see through all these different people, how can I unpack and process and heal myself, you know? But
And I think
to
also,
answer your question, I'm sorry.
go ahead. Yeah.
To answer your question, I haven't really had any issues, and I just think that maybe if I wasn't a clinician, maybe I may go to somebody and ask some stuff. Like, there's not a therapy for black girls thing where I love Dr. Joy. I wish one day, hopefully, I could be the black male Dr. Joy, the guy that you can come to, the brother that you can come to talk about, therapy for black boys. How do we unpack our stuff? We just don't have that. And I think it's a male thing also, just to not open up, to be vulnerable, to keep stuff in. I think generally speaking, I was talking to my supervisor the other day, and I think that society is set up, and I think it's more acceptable for women to be a lot of times more open, but it's not acceptable for men to be open about these things. So I think that the NBA, the NFL, and even hip hop now are catering more to, or they're rolling out and making it seem like it's less of a stigma to come out about your mental health, like from DeMar DeRozan or Kevin Love. And these are like, I think this probably is different because maybe there's some men that may be transgender men or bi men or gay men or all those other spectrums of what masculinity can be for them to I've seen receive therapy. But speaking from my standpoint, the last rung to get embraced in or to be open to it or like cisgender heterosexual men like me. And I think that's the once we get that, you're able to we'll be able to call. And I think when you heal yourself, you're able to atone and to be called in and to not practice toxic masculinity. I recently watched this movie called Last Black Man in San Francisco, and part of me is some stuff going on in the background. Um, but I watched this movie called Last Black Man in San Francisco, and basically the big thing that they're dealing with is gentrification. But the other smaller things, but she kind of spoke out to me, was this whole general thing of toxic masculinity. They showed in the movie some dudes that are on the corner making fun of other men, because that's how I guess men like to take advantage of and have power and privilege over other men. But those other men who they thought were quote unquote gay or soft, but those guys that they thought were gay or soft actually had some really healthy masculinity, just to proximity that they would sit next to each other or how they would just be amongst one another made a guy with toxic masculine ideals feel like that was something other. So he had to reject it. Definitely a really good movie. But, you know, I have to start, I know I have to stop looking at stuff from a cisgender heterosexual standpoint because there's many different rungs of masculinity, and I'm here for all types to help heal. And you know, also me going to therapy is really ideal and good because as a person, I'm a human first outside of therapy. So, but also vicarious trauma, who do I go to for that? And then three, if I'm not worked through something through myself, if I'm going into a session with something I haven't resolved myself, I may trigger somebody else because I'm not doing my work. So,
Right.
you know, I'm really big on that because I want to be as best as I can, and I'm here for the long run.
So for those who are watching who don't know what toxic masculinity is, can you describe that? Can you explain what it looks like, how it presents? Maybe like a textbook definition kind of, so they know when I see it, I know what it is.
So toxic masculinity is more of a masculinity that is about power, it's about privilege, it's about you know, kind of being violent, having limited masculinity. Like masculinity can be this only one thing, juxtaposed to healthy masculinity when you could be open, you can be free, you could talk about your feelings, you could talk about how you your emotions, you can be vulnerable. Toxic masculinity would make perfect example, if I could say toxic masculinity, is 50 Cent. 50 Cent always makes fun of people. He's always just making fun of people, and he just seems like he hasn't had anything resolved. I don't think his father was there for him, and he's taking out some stuff on his own son. So I think that's 50 Cent is an example of that. But it's just somebody who's always making fun of. They haven't gone through their own stuff and have a limited amount of masculinity and just have it in a certain sense, but it goes upon many different realms. And I've even had to come to that in my own conclusions about things. And I've felt with my clients, I've had to call them in, you know, say like, well, what was that when you said, tell me a little bit more about why you use that word for women. And I'll let you use any, you know, I'll let you use your imagination. There's many different words. Or how can I, like me being in therapy, I feel like I can't sit in front of a person if I'm not, again, doing my own work, but I need to be able to be called in on my stuff so I'm able to better enhance those that come across my desk as well, because dealing with a lot of men that have limited amounts of masculinity that, again, they don't want to talk about their feelings and emotions, or, oh, that's for women. That's women complain. Women do this. And it's like, generally, these brothers come and complain to me for an hour. So it's like, what you're doing is you're making it seem like anything feminine is weaker than, but really you're kind of a hypocrite right now. Now I don't say that, but in a very therapeutic way and processing way, and I kind of call attention to it and just think about it and process it.
So I think the first time that I was exposed to toxic masculinity is my husband. When we first met, he had a best friend. He would call their relationship a bromance, and he would say, "I love you." He would never say "no homo," and I was like, "Don't you mean I love you, no homo?" And he was like, "Nah, I just love him. Like there's no caption needed. I just love him. He's my friend." Like, and I was just like, "What?" And he was like, "Why do I have to put a caveat there for you to know, like, he's my friend, I love him." And he would hug him, and I had never been exposed to like two grown straight men hugging. And he was like, "Nah, I love him. Like, I'm going to hug my boy. Like, I love you." And I was just like, oh my gosh, like my thought pattern, and mind you, I am like a whole entire adult, master's degree tote, you know, and I'm just like, and I should know better. And for
Right.
me, the norm was always like, we just have to add no homo, because if not, there's a question there. And at the end of the day, regardless of what's what, like the idea and the feeling of being loved and accepted is something that all humans need. Whether you like, you're a girl who likes girls or a guy who likes guys, or however you dress, you present that, we need that feeling of love. And he said it to me, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, where I was like, oh my gosh, why was that my first thought? And that's when I think of toxic masculinity, the first thing comes to my mind, where I'm just like, oh my gosh, the idea that I've got to go put a caption on something. I cried because my friend died. No, I just cried because I was sad. Like, I don't have to have a caveat or a reason that makes it good enough to feel. And I think that
Right.
for people in general, like not just women or men or Black people, just like in general, that we're so used to being okay that we don't want to feel, and that in itself is toxic. So when you say like you're doing the work, for those who don't know what that
I
means,
think, you know, coming from a single parent household, I'm not.
good. Coming from a single parent household,
Oh, my bad, my bad. So even coming from a single parent household, my mom, she grew up with three brothers and a very strong, dominant father in Brooklyn, New York. That's where we all began life. And, you know, it's interesting what, and I think she did the best that she can, like any mom would do. But it's just interesting how no matter who you are, male or female, any or whatever gender you do or don't, whatever, we can still buy into these things and enforce that. And it's just interesting that my mom is a Black woman. She did her best, but she probably enforced some of these things upon me, and still probably does, and it's still maybe a little different. She sees some toxic stuff. She's called me in, but maybe like, "Oh, you lost basketball? Don't come in here and cry. Go out there and play again." You know. It's interesting seeing my journey with all the stuff that I've been taught, and even just seeing how even no matter what gender or gender you don't assign yourself to, how we can still be in this world of all this stuff. It's really strong. But what were you gonna say?
I was gonna talk about like the ability to feel. So like for me as a therapist who is also doing my own work, I was always taught to be strong. And strong was never asking for help. Strong was never like admitting defeat. Strong was never taking a break. Strong was, okay, you caught an L, before you finish, like the blood dries, you get back to work. But like there's no time to cry, you know, there's no crying in baseball. All these things we hear over and over and over again. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to be strong, you have to be strong. And I'm learning now that my strength is saying that I can't, that I need a break, I need help, I've got to call somebody, I've got to reach out. How do we change that narrative of what strong looks like and really get the message out that it's okay to be in community when you're not okay?
Can you still hear me? Somebody's calling me right now. So.
Yeah, I can still hear. I just can't see you. No worries. Go ahead.
Okay, now we're back. So I think how we can change that is just keep on doing what we're doing. Just leading by example, being the role models that we can be, and just changing the narrative. Like even in our families, I used to be a person that with family, I think a lot of us go to grad school, we get a little education, we think we know everything, and going tit for tat. But for one, being patient with people and just dropping off a seed, letting stuff as we do as therapists marinate with somebody, and just leading by example. Because the toxic positivity stuff, toxic positivity and the toxic work ethic, like you're only one person. Like to be honest, even if you believe in God, Jesus took the Sabbath day off. So if a spirit form has to take a day off, and I believe in the spiritual form, what about the one in the human form for us? So just to change the narratives, lead by example, be patient, and just if you're like me, I used to go tit for tat people, but just processing it and being like the guy, the white dude with the afro, having that Bob Ross moment to be like, oh, something a little bit more about that. Do you think it could be a little different? I'm like, oh, okay. And leaving it like that. Because people come to their own conclusions, and maybe that person will never get to where you are. That's fine. But just knowing where you are, knowing where you stand, and sticking hold to your beliefs, and also being a person of integrity. Like, if you're gonna be, if you're gonna talk about these things, like, there's a lot of stuff in therapy we talk about, but are we really doing it ourselves, right? So just having that integrity about yourself,
Yeah, and I think that we don't do that. And I say we as therapists, because I feel like in order for us to feel like, particularly like younger therapists, like the therapists that are like under 40 who are in here like building their practice, like we have to kind of have the aura of being like okay all the time. And we had an explosion recently here in South Florida, and I had my first panic attack this weekend. Like I lost
Plantation last week, right?
Like, so I'm in my office now, and it's literally like a block northeast of me. And I was supposed to be at work, and I wasn't here, and I was at home. What's like I absolutely lost it. I could not pray, like literally. If I didn't know how to do like my grounding work and my breath work and my tapping, like I was going to end up hyperventilating, and like I lost it. And I talked about it in a YouTube video that I just put out. I did my first episode on me. I had someone like, nope, I need to be honest. If I'm gonna say True Talks with Jess, like, and I talked about like how I spent the whole day in bed, and I had to like say to my therapist friends, hey, I just need you to pray. Like I literally cannot move. I need you to pray. Convince me not to drive to my office in the middle of this traffic, because I was like, I know I'm going to be, if I drive out there now, there's cops everywhere, there's the ambulance, the sights and smells, and I know trauma, I'm a community trauma therapist, so I had to like really go through it and say, oh my gosh, as a human, I am losing my stuff. Like in this moment, I am losing it. Like full on, sweaty palms, can't breathe, heart, and I've never had a panic attack. And I lost it, like all the way lost it. And times past, you just kind of like, well, I feel bad, so you just move past. I was like, no, let me let all these emotions like run their course. Because I tell my clients, like, sit in your emotions and whatever. And in doing my own work and making sure that I practice what I preach, and I am not a hypocrite when I sit in that chair and tell you, try this, do this. I can say, hey, I've tried this, and it's like for certain breath work, I can't do because it makes me anxious. Other people love to like sit in dark rooms and do body scans. A body scan will have me crawling out my skin. I cannot sit down for an hour, like for real, like I'm done. And so I sat back and I did the work this weekend, and I didn't like avoid it, and I wasn't, let me rush through this. Like I didn't do anything on Saturday till like 6 o'clock. And I had plans, and I just can't. I had to like put everything to the side, put my phone on silent, because everyone was calling, like, are you okay? Are you good? Are you in the office today? What's going on? Are you living? Are you breathing? Are you good? Is your office okay? And at the end of the day, I was like, I made a Facebook post. Guys, I'm good. I'm a little shooken up. If you know how to pray, whatever. But I really need to just take this time. And my friends and family were like, oh my gosh, that's so not like you. Because normally I was kind of just, okay, well, I'm a little anxious and I'll just push past it and I'll keep working. I was like, no, like my body is really, really reacting. I needed to tap into what was going on. And it ended up being gratitude that I wasn't here. When I went through the work, I was just so grateful that it ended up happening, that my day was changed from what it was supposed to be, and I wasn't here to experience that. But like all of the other stuff of seeing it on Facebook, getting text messages, getting like it really made me feel like I was physically here. And my body and my mind didn't know the difference. And at the end of all it was just gratitude. But I had to work through all of that hard stuff. And oh my gosh, was it hard. Like it was the hardest thing that I've done in a long time. And we don't talk about, like, just come to therapy and it gets better. But it doesn't. For those who have like anxiety and like actual trauma or vicarious trauma or burnt out or depressed or whatever they have going on with them, there's so much work outside of that 1 hour in session to like really go through and do that. And I don't think we talk about the sustainability of that, or also like how we evolve. So you talked about a lot of like how you used to be. As you've evolved and you've gone through your journey, you've done your work, do people still respond to you as the Josh of 2 years, 3 therapists, 4 years ago?
Maybe slightly. I mean, I think I'm an introvert, and I'm also not trustworthy. I've never been trustworthy with a lot of people, so I'm very cautious in general. But the people that are close and near and dear to me, it may make a jab or a joke here and there, but I know I'm not taking it personal. but I'm also transparent about how I used to be. Um, so I don't think that really happens too often. And I'm glad, because that just goes to show me how people are not throwing shit back in my face. Sorry for cursing. They're not throwing stuff back in my face. Um, and they really care about my whole genuine wellness. I don't have really anybody that I could think of that comes to mind, but I could see how that could be. I mean, my example to somebody like that would just to be, if that's happening to you, um, take a step back, re-examine that relationship you have with some people, and just people do not like when you change. You being different, or you used to be like this, and it's like, to be honest with you, the whole ASAP Rocky thing is going on, where he's over in Sweden, and I know I could get some slack for this, but I'm not. It is what it is. I know he's in Sweden, and I know that he was defending himself, and there's videos of him telling people, "No, leave me alone. We don't want to do this." He was trying to de-escalate the situation as best as he can. Now he's in jail, in Sweden on a yoga mat. People smearing feces on the yoga mat, and the food is horrible. And I say that in relation to people throwing up in his face when he said, "I don't live in Ferguson, I live in Beverly Hills and Soho. I live over there. I'm in fashion." He said some misogynistic things. I don't agree with any of that. At the same time, that doesn't mean that you can't have compassion and empathy for that person. And that was years ago. I would assume with anybody that this guy has changed by then somewhat. Like Malcolm X that we know so much of being this humanitarian, this black man who was for the people. He was not always like that. People talk about Nipsey Hussle, and I'm not excusing them for anything. I don't agree with anything any negativity, but we've all been human and all said some things. So I think it takes a sense for you to look at yourself and look at the situation and just value what evolution is, and hopefully people are not bringing you back to that same thing. So that's how I look at it.
I think that's a really dope way to do it. And I think that because you're so adamant about bringing like culture and what's going on right now into it, that it really takes the edge off of coming to therapy. Because you're like, hey, like other people that you look at, that you see on your timeline, your newsfeed, whatever, they're having like real life issues. And because it's a lot more prevalent in social media, that it helps a little bit. But I love how everything that you tie in, outside of like the fact of that there's clearly research behind it, empirically, you're like, hey, in real life, this is happening. And I think that's really helpful. If somebody were looking for like resources on how to get or stay well, what would you tell them to do other than your podcast, which I know is dope? Where else would you send them?
Thank you for that. Resources. I mean, I'm not dodging the question, but I will say my resources come from, I say my partner. She's also a therapist and a social worker. So I may go to her. I may go to my melanated social work guys. I may come to you and look at something you may post. I may look at what supervision support posts. I may go to my supervisor. I go to the people that I can really quickly, like more so touch and get in contact with. But also, I think just for starters, I think Brene Brown, she has some really good books. She's dope. I think Dr. Jess, she's a psychiatrist. A lot of stuff that she's doing and just being well is awesome. I just started reading this book called Narrative Means a Therapeutic End. That's a way to start. So through books. What else? There's the Hats Off podcast, which is really dope. There's the Joy of Social Work podcast, which is really dope. There's Chill Will Radio, which is really dope. And I mean, I was gonna say a point about the whole self-care, everything does work for everybody. I was listening to Chill Will Radio, Chill Will. It's a guy named Willis Cooks. He's a social worker in LA. He was on the Hip Hop Social Workers podcast. And Hip Hop Social Worker, Christopher Scott, I believe his name is, that takes place in Portland. But Willis was saying to Chris on the podcast that with self-care, it like finding the path to self-care comes with failure. You have to see what you don't like or doesn't work, see what does work. It's just like dating and playing the field. You got to see what works and doesn't work. It's just like a therapist. It's not for the most part, I'm gonna say it's not really always gonna be the person that's the client that could be the issue. Maybe it's the wrong place. Maybe it's the wrong therapist. So it takes therapy, finding the right therapist, finding the right partner. It takes time with these things. But yeah, I try to read books, podcasts, TED Talks, a lot of Yalom, I believe his name is the Yalom books that we all learn. The Gottman Institute has some pretty good resources. And then just I'm not in the NASW, but seeing like what is on the NASW calendar of events for like maybe certain trainings. Like it'd be dope for me if I can get into like a trauma focused CBT certification group, getting signed up for like solution focused therapy, or even like a lot of times people deal with PTSD. It'd be dope. Like, so I'm saying all these things, learning from other clinicians through podcasts and books, but I've learned through, I listened to one podcast, and I'd have a lot of clients that deal with trauma, PTSD, and EMDR. Is a really good thing to use.
Game changer, because I deal with primarily trauma. Game changer, like literally has changed the game on how I practice. I'm not causing people to like really go through and tell me their narrative like in the TFCBT. Like they're literally doing their own work without the intrusion of having to explain how they feel. I think everyone should at least go through like the level 1 if you're not certain about being certified, just so you know. Game changer. I'm sorry. I just love it. It literally has revolutionized both my life and my practice. I did it with my best friend. And during that process, like you have to do the work. So we were each other's therapists. We went back and forth. And the things that I learned about myself just through the training, forget the work we did after that. I was like, yo, there's some really jacked up layers under there. And a lot of things that are linked that I didn't know linked. Like through the process, I was working on my website. Something happened with the website where it didn't work out well. And I remember feeling I didn't have a voice. And when we did the processing of the whole thing, I almost died last year. And it reminded me while I was laying in the hospital bed and they told me that I was going to die if I didn't do da 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 da. And I felt like I had no voice. And they were like, so your website designer misinterpreting your email? I was like, it felt the exact same way. And there's no logical link there. But that same level of like mute and disconnected and powerless that I felt the same way. And I've seen it work wonders with like complex years and years and years and years of trauma. Because I was like, this little moving your fingers, tapping thing is foolishness. But I went, listen, love it. Absolutely love it. Hands down, it is an amazing, amazing modality. And it lets your client remain in control. You teach them how to ground themselves and what to do when they abreact, when they have like a flashback or where they don't feel safe in their own body, and how to work through that to scale things, to replace negative thoughts. It's just amazing. I would definitely say take it. Definitely.
And I would also say Therapist Aid. I think therapistaid.com or .net.org, whatever. That is a lifesaver. Therapist, just Google Therapist Aid and you can see there's like workshops, interactive tools, articles, all types of things about anger, about depression, about communication, art therapy, relationship skills, all types of things. And I utilize those things for like my workshops that I have to lead or even for clients because I try to balance both. I'm a type of person, or I used to be a therapist where, and it was more when I was a rookie. I say I'm a sophomore now in the whole, situational thing. I'm trying to get my 10,000 hours of proficiency based upon Malcolm Gladwell, right? So, I used to always come very prepared, all this stuff ready. And one time my supervisor at the time in Harlem was like, Josh, you come super prepared all the time. What about just talking to them? What about just more narrative things? And I wasn't ready because I'm like, damn, I'm not going to know what to say. And it's taking time. And about 2 years later, I can balance, workshop stuff and structure stuff, but I can also balance just having like a genuinely healthy narrative-based conversation. And I think working with a lot of Afro-Caribbean, West Indian, African-American, Latino, like we like a lot of narrative stuff. Well, I think in my experience, a lot of narrative stuff, especially is like the gateway at first, and then that helps you to maybe get your feet wet to get some rapport and get them to open up. And then maybe they could be open to doing different, whatever types of CBT, DBT, EMDR, whatever the case may be, So I think definitely narrative, just talking, building rapport. That's probably initially what opens up that rapport and builds a relationship in the beginning. That's helpful among all the other things. So I just always building upon my my clinical tool belt is a key.
If you were to tell someone, maybe a younger version of you, somebody in like their early 20s, late teens, who was looking into going to a field that they were not represented in, like, so I think about it, I can literally count on my hand how many, forget just Black male, but how many male clinicians that I know. And then forget that we go into like young clinicians, we go to like young Afro-Caribbean clinicians. So like you're like the 1% of the population of people that are actually therapists now. What would you tell somebody who wanted to go into a place where they weren't represented, like where there wasn't anybody like them?
I would just say, for one, go with your gut feeling. You always want to trust your gut feeling. 2, have a good support system around you. 3, realize that stuff is not always going to go your way, but just don't ask why me, ask how is this teaching me. That's how I would do. And also a big thing, especially for me, try to network and find other people that are doing some of the things that look like you. Nowadays, like when I was a teenager, they didn't have, well, I was like a late teen. They had MySpace and all this stuff, but social media has definitely just grown and grown and grown. It's almost no excuse unless you can't afford it or you don't have the means. But if you have the means, I'll say, Google some things, find some some chat groups, Facebook groups, some IG stuff, find some books, find somebody that is maybe older than you that you trust, that is in that field, that if you could find them and touch them, build a rapport with, because networking is key. It is a lot about what you know, but a lot of it is about who you know. So that's what I would say.
Okay, let's do it. How would somebody find you? So I know you're in Boston, but let's say they wanted to follow you on social media. How would they get access to you, your podcast, what it is you're doing, what's going on with you? How would they find you?
So you can find me at the Bearded Social Worker on Instagram. You can find our melanated or our group account, because we all manage it. You can find us at Melanated Social Work on Instagram, and also on Melanated Social Work. Click the link in the bio so you can get into our podcast. We just 3 episodes in, so just bear with us. We try to have one once a month, just so we can balance our lives and then get some stuff to have some content. We're slow and steady with it. Yeah, that's basically it.
All right, cool. Thank you guys for joining us for this episode. I will see you guys next week.
Peace.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Truth Talks with Jess, the real behind the real. Look forward to seeing you next week here. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram and on Facebook at the Jess Jefferson, as well as at SW Social Support. Look forward to seeing you then. Bye.